Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
Merryn Talks Money listeners, here is a quick public service announcement before we get into today's conversation. Are you a Bloomberg subscriber? If you are not, you should be, and here is why. You will get ad-free episodes of this podcast and access to my Merryn Talks Money newsletter, as well as access to John's award-winning newsletter, Money Distilled. You'll also get access to subscriber-only events, such as the one that we will be hosting on March 17th. More details on that later this week, so be sure to sign up for your .com subscription so that you can join us. And of course, on top of all that, you will get unlimited access to Bloomberg.com and to the Bloomberg app, including exclusive stories and premium market tools. Subscribe now at Bloomberg.com/podcast offer. Welcome to Merryn Talks Money, the podcast in which people who know the markets explain the markets. I'm Merryn Somerset Webb. Today, I am speaking with Richard Tice, British businessman and deputy leader of the poll-leading party Reform UK. Given that the top story in the UK at the moment is whether or not Keir Starmer will be Prime Minister for much longer, we thought it would make sense to speak to someone crafting the policies of the opposition party leading in the polls right now. So I spoke to Richard about what Reform UK would do for the UK economy if the party was elected into government. What are the party's actual policies, and do they have real plans to see those policies through? Richard, thank you so much for joining us today.
Great pleasure. Good to be with you. It's an exciting time.
Oh, isn't it just? Now, listen, we are speaking just as it becomes increasingly clear that time might be relatively short for Keir Starmer. How long do you think he's got?
He'll be lucky to have weeks, frankly. But there's lots of speculation that it's just a matter of days. I mean, his sort of key prop has resigned, and information is leaking out more and more about the role that Mandelson played in the heart of Starmer's regime, essentially, not only in the run-up to being US ambassador, but also in the run-up to the general election. What role did he play in appointing ministers? Was he actually at the heart of government?
Well, do you know what? Everyone else is going to be talking about that, so we're not going to. We're going to talk about you, which I'm sure you would prefer. Anyway, now, all change. It's entirely possible there are various different moving parts all over the place. It's entirely possible we'll end up with an election much sooner than many would have expected. And I suppose the real question then is, how ready is Reform? Should it come to that? Should you possibly win an election sooner than you would expect to? How ready are you? We talk a lot about how Britain is broken. Everyone knows what the problems are, or everyone has some kind of level of consensus about what the main problems are in the UK. And everyone also now has a feeling that they are close to unfixable. So to start to govern, the first thing that you would need to do is to completely fix, reform, overhaul the civil service and management in the public sector across the board in order to actually get any of your policies through in the amount of time that reflects the level of patience that electorates have these days. How would that work?
Well, we've been talking for months about the likelihood of an early general election. We'd been saying from sort of autumn 27 onwards. And so we've been sort of preparing ourselves. And we've been saying the reason that it's most likely to be triggered is some form of financial crisis. Everything since then, all of the data is bad. The borrowing levels are through the roof. There's no growth. Job numbers are dire. And then you've got a management crisis at the top of government. So in terms of the likelihood of an early election, that has increased dramatically. Whether it's likely this year in 2026, that still would be relatively low odds. But the likelihood of a 2027 election has soared dramatically. We will be ready. We're getting ready. And there's sort of lots of speculation. But, we'll be confirming sort of likely shadow cabinet roles over the coming next few weeks. And there's a huge amount going on. I've got 7 working groups in different areas. In financial markets, I gave a speech at Bloomberg in November about setting up working groups in financial governance and regulation, in pensions and savings, SME growth, capital and taxation. So there's lots of work going on through 2026 to ensure that we are ready for government as and when an election comes.
Yeah, but everything that you've just said, that's about policies. That's about what do we want to do? What would be the right thing to do? And I think, we'll move on to that in a minute. But what I'm really trying to get to is how do you get those policies through? Because government after government after government arrives, says, we're going to do this. This is how it's going to be.
The difference,
and it never is.
But you see, the difference is that recently governments have been run by what I would call PPE sort of policy wonks and special advisors, as opposed to serious business people with a track record of running businesses, growing businesses, making money for shareholders and investors. We're different. We're just tougher. We're stronger. And we've got a much clearer, principled view in our gut, in our heart, as to what needs to be done to create growth. And that's the difference. And bluntly, as we're getting to grips with running 12 councils, we're cutting our teeth. Look, is it easy? No, we're not saying it is. Does it require courage and some resilience? Yes, and we've got that in spades. And I think the establishment, the civil service, actually quietly, many of them know that Britain is broken and would welcome some strong, determined ministers coming in who remember that key maxim in the corporate world. At the end of the day, advisors advise, directors decide. And in politics, advisors advise and ministers should decide, not advisors. And we understand that. And I think that would be a sizable shift. At the end of the day, the biggest risk in life is never taking one. Risk calculated and then smartly monitored is a good thing. That's how you create value. That's how you create growth. And that's what we need to do to run a country.
And you've begun to learn how hard that is in your local council experiences.
We have. I mean, we're seeing how some officers have been very professional, very supportive, and other officers less so. And we spot that. But in a sense, that's a good way of cutting our teeth. And I'm the head of Doge across those councils. So I liaise every week closely with our leaders. And in a sense, that is giving us some really good experience as to the do's, the don'ts, the tips, and so on. And obviously, we've got May elections across much of England, Wales, and Scotland. On the 7th of May, we'll have thousands of seats, and we're going to win lots more councils.
Going back to the impatience of electorates these days, you don't get much time. If there were an election, if you're in pretty quickly, what would be the one or two things that you could do immediate implementation that would show change? What could really work fast?
Yeah, so we would immediately serve notice to leave the European Convention on Human Rights, would scrap the Human Rights Act. That would stop the lawfare, stop the blockages. We would scrap Net Stupid Zero, which is the most catastrophic policy of financial self-harm voluntarily imposed on the nation by Westminster politicians. And that would be a seismic shift in the way politics has been done for the last decade and more. And then what that would do is enable energy bills to come down rapidly, and we would cut significant other wasteful government spending.
Yeah. Can I interrupt you there and go back to net zero and how it would cut bills quickly? Because, of course, all the contracts that exist are legally permanent, right? They're not going away. So all the CFD payments, etc., they're set in stone. They're expensive.
But what's not set in stone? Yeah, but what's not set in stone is all of the carbon taxes and levies that form the majority now of people's domestic energy bills, be they gas or electric. And we would be, I'm already talking to, which I've spoken about openly, oil and gas producers and explorers about completely changing the regime so that they are welcome as opposed to treated as pariahs. But in terms of what individuals, voters would see, they would see a change to their energy bills. They would see a seismic shift in the way that we are running things. And as I say, we would cut wasteful spending immediately, cut daft regulations. Then you can afford what I call performance-related tax cuts. Look, people will understand that you can't, Rome's not built in a day. You can't fix everything overnight. But the direction of travel, the big shift where you're not in hock to an overseas court with biased judges, that would be significant. Our policies on immigration would, I think, also be a significant shift in terms of restricting legal immigration to a net zero number and ensuring that actually we do have a proper detain and deport policy immediately that dramatically reduces the attractiveness of illegally breaking into our country across the English Channel.
And cancelling the ILR, right? So not all residency as an automatic path to citizenship.
Correct,
which I think you think would bring the welfare bill down significantly.
Well, we would bring the welfare bill down by basically not paying welfare to any overseas nationals. I mean, the whole point about immigration is people come to the UK to work. Well, the clues in the name work. So we wouldn't be paying welfare on that. And we've got to motivate work. We've got to make work pay.
Back to net zero. Can you give me any sense? And we're obsessed with energy prices on this podcast, obsessed with them because we believe
quite
that,
rightly,
as I think everybody does,
outrageously high.
Well, I think it's just that we believe that all economic activity, indeed all economic activity of any kind, is energy transformed, right? So the cheaper energy is, the more economic activity you get. We're very worried about UK manufacturing, chemicals, et cetera, et cetera. So how fast and how much? Can you give me a percentage number for a small chemicals factory that might have to shut down soon? What percentage would scrapping net zero get their bill down over a 1 or 2 year period?
Oh, over a 2 year period, I think they would see it come down by give or take a third. I mean, I'm just as a without question, and I will be, and we will be totally focused on that, because the simple maxim is you cannot be a rich nation without cheap energy. And there's a reason the US is growing at 3.5% to 4% a year and we're flatlining. We've got the most expensive electricity in the world. And let's just go back 20 years ago. No one was talking about the price of electricity or that we might have rationing or blackouts. Now it's one of the first things on the agenda in any boardroom. And, we've also got to look at protecting British industry. I'll be talking a lot about that over the coming months. And, is it really a good idea to allow the UK automotive scene to be completely and utterly dominated by Chinese EVs, heavily subsidised, and put at risk 500,000 jobs in the automotive sector in the UK? I would suggest not.
There is a lot of talk from people who support net zero strongly about the number of jobs that would be lost across the board were you to cancel net zero. But I suspect you would say that they would be easily balanced out by the rise in manufacturing jobs. It's literally opposite. I mean,
the destruction of manufacturing jobs is way, way more than the paucity of green jobs that are supposedly being created. And they're desperate when they have to redesignate plumbers and carpenters as green jobs in order to try and boost their numbers. I mean, the thing is, it's just ridiculous. I travel around the world quite a bit, and many other countries are laughing at our naive stupidity as our politicians bang on about being a world leader in net zero. And they say, thanks very much, we'll take your jobs, we'll take your money, and we'll sell you some lots of gas and oil. Thank you.
Can I move on to asking about taxes? I know you're a believer in the Laffer curve, and I think we are here too. We've even had Arthur Laffer on the podcast and done a great pod with him about things. And I know that there are quite a lot of tax cuts that you have discussed, and getting rid of inheritance tax, all this kind of thing. But can I just move you over to Scotland, where there is a plan, I understand it, were reform to come into power in Scotland, a practice election coming up, to cut income tax in Scotland below levels of England. Is that right?
Well, Scotland has a freedom to adjust its income tax, which the SNP used to raise income tax above the rest of the UK. Look, competition's a good thing. All of your listeners, I suspect, believe in that, and tax competition is also a good thing. So why not have that competitive edge and tension? Great. If it forces people to stop wasting taxpayers' cash on daft schemes, whether it's in Scotland or elsewhere in the UK, fantastic. I mean, lots of policies will emerge, but we believe in competition. Why not?
But in Scotland, the only way probably for reform to get the ability to test that policy, of which I thoroughly approve, by the way. I've always thought that Scotland could become the richest country or nation, whatever you like to call it, in Europe extremely quickly by slashing income tax well below that in the rest of the UK. But the only way for reform to get into a position where they could make that happen would probably to make a deal with the Tories to stop the SNP getting in again on a relatively small percentage of the vote.
Well, the truth is the Tories are disappearing in Scotland. In fact, post-May the 7th, they're not really going to be a national party. And so our message to voters, if you want to stop the SNP, the only party to vote for is Reform. We're polling second in Scotland already. And when I went to Scotland about a year ago now, and the friendly Scottish media said, "What's your policy?" I said, "Drill, Scotland, drill." And they said, "You can't say that. That's outrageous." And turns out it's actually rather popular.
Yeah.
The good common sense of the Scottish voters are polling soared. And we've been on an upward trend ever since. And very, very nearly won the Hamilton MSP by-election a few months back.
But are you really a unionist party or a separatist party? I always think when I listen to Nigel Farage talking about Scotland, a little wobbly on this, quite keen to see the end of the Barnett formula and maybe full fiscal devolution. But there's also sometimes a hint there that he's not really interested in whether Scotland stays part of the UK or not.
That's nonsense. We are absolutely 120% a unionist party, full-throated, and there is no better flag than the Union flag. It's as simple as that. And we are, to use that old expression, we are stronger together as a united kingdom.
Okay. Let's stick with full-throated support for various things. What about the UK stock market, which is our other major obsession here? We worry about its shrinkage. We worry about its low valuations. We worry about the loss of the extraordinary financial network that we have in London and indeed in Edinburgh, and that's slowly wasting away as the stock market wastes away. So one thing that we are very keen to see happen almost immediately on any competent government getting into power would be the abolition in full of stamp duty. I wondered where you stood on that.
Well, we're very focused on the UK stock market. It's dear to our hearts, and you'll be hearing a lot more from me about that in the coming months. Of that I can assure you, and that's one of the reasons why...
Oh, tell us something now. Time's running short.
Let me just say that lots of people have been making representations about things, for example, like tax relief on cash ISAs, about why... pension funds are investing so little in the UK market. Why are IPOs down 80% in the last decade? Why is the FCA impinging on so many areas that it doesn't need to? Why is our SME growth capital sort of in rounds 2, 3 and 4 disappearing elsewhere? Why has the AIM got the fewest number of companies in 25 years listed on it? All of these things, we need to make it simpler, easier, and more attractive for people to want to stay here. So I'm very, very focused on it. Indeed, I understand the point about stamp duty. All I would gently say is that what we can't do, we absolutely buy into the Laffer curve and all of that, but we can't do a Liz Truss. So we have to show...
there's not much money.
So what we have to do is...
signal.
So what the markets would like is for us to prove that we're cutting wasteful spending on daft projects like Net Stupid Zero that waste $30 billion a year. And the like. For example, the Bank of England should not be paying interest on the voluntary QE reserves. It shouldn't be doing quantitative tightening. Again, that would save 20 billion plus or minus. So, if we prove the savings, cut daft regulations, then we can show this is the direction of travel of tax cuts. And look, there's lots of people saying you should cut this, that and the other.
Would you bring back the Brit ISA and mandate pension funds to invest a certain amount of their AUM in the UK stock market?
I think serious questions have to be asked. Why are we giving tax relief on people to have cash ISAs with some £350 billion worth of cash sitting there, not helping UK companies grow and invest and have additional equity resources? So those are all the questions we're well aware of and looking at as we speak.
Do you ever get any donations in Bitcoin? I see, because one of your policies is to make the UK a crypto hub, and
yes.
I see that you are the
Wouldn't
only
it be great?
political bud. I
Wouldn't
don't know. Would it?
The City of London has a long track record of being financial innovators, and crypto and Bitcoin is obviously the main one. Is something to be, let's bring it onshore, mate. Let's make it easy, cheap, transparent, tax attractive, and
Yes, and I want to pick you up on tax attractive on this one. So there is an idea in your policies that you would put a lower capital gains rate, capital tax rate on crypto, which
as opposed to it being offshore, where everything's hidden, there's no transparency, and people worry about other issues.
But why lower on that than on other things? That doesn't really make any sense. I mean, Bitcoin is not a productive asset. Why would you charge a lower rate of tax on that than you would, for example, on a productive activity?
Well, I didn't say that we didn't want lower rates on productive activity. Maybe I want lower rates on everything to create higher growth. It's just a case of timing and scale, but also we want to attract and retain and develop people and brilliant talent here, as opposed to losing it to other parts of the world.
Bitcoin Reserve Fund?
Well, just patience is a virtue. I know you like to sort of reveal everything, but patience is a virtue.
I'm just reading the policies.
Well, thank heaven someone does.
Richard, we have to stop there. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this week's Merryn Talks Money. If you like our show, rate, review and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And keep sending questions or comments to merrynmoney@bloomberg.net. You can also follow me and John on Twitter or X. I'm at MerrynSW and John is John_Stepek. This episode was hosted by me, Merryn Somerset Webb. It was produced by Summer Sadi and Moses Andam. Sound designed by Blake Maples and Aaron Casper. Special thanks to Richard Tice.